I'll tell you this right now, I was not familiar with Naoki Urasawa's game. And I've always heard of his work here and there. I've always heard of 21st Century Boys. I've always heard of Billy Bat. I've always heard of Monster. That was like one of the mangas I've always heard of, or animes that everyone sort of suggests from this man himself. But I decided to watch Pluto because well, it was more recent, as well as it looked really interesting, especially the premise that is surrounding around Pluto. I'll just give you the bare bones and I'll let you decide yourself if you want to watch it before I get completely into it, right? So the thing I will say is that Pluto is basically one of the arcs from Astro Boy that is a completely retelling of that arc, but having it be so different and more interesting that it feels like it's its own thing come to life. Things I wanted to go over and just talk about is this man's writing. This man's writing is on a completely different level, it feels like. Interesting enough, one of the feelings I had got when I was watching this anime, it made me feel like I was like reading a book or reading a novel. Well, no, more or less reading a book. And that's not in a bad way or a bad statement, right? That's in the most positive ways I can actually give it, right? I understand how some people can say reading as a book in a more negative light, but I see it more like in a more positive light for this specific situation. From the amazing dialogue to the beautiful imagery together, it feels like someone just reading a straight out book and me getting every single detail completely right of what they're saying to me. Going off the dialogue itself, like he knows people, like he knows how to write somebody as an actual person or someone that you've probably even known in real life. Like it feels genuinely real when it comes to some of these people and some of the emotions that they do show out, or storytelling to flesh out a person to make you believe like this person can actually exist in real life. We feel a little bit of a similar, not comparison wise, but I'm just saying in a similar sense for like Quentin Tarantino, right? Where like I can just hear his dialogue all day. It could just be two people sitting in a room and you just basically hear what they're talking about. I just feel the same way with this guy right here. Thing is, some of these scenes hit like a fucking freight train when they're combined with the imagery itself. Things I forgot to mention is that this is also a mystery anime where you're supposed to figure out what is happening or what is going on to a certain degree or a certain point all the way up until you get to the end. But with this anime, I did have some points where I did understand it, and as he's walking me through, I was like, okay, I get this part, I get this part, I get this part. But there's other parts where I do not see coming whatsoever, and it's like a shocking blowback. I tell you, by the time you get to the end of this, you're definitely gonna have like a self-realization of like, wow, this is something. The thing that I always get brownie points to if you've been on the channel for a while is just the fact of you being able to build up a character in such a short amount of time and convey to me who this person is or what they are. Insanely enough, feels like that's like every fucking episode where we get introduced to a new person and we get like all of who they are and what they are as a being itself. In this video forward, I am going to go into a little bit of spoilers, not fully. I will say in the video if I go into like a full-on just completely spoil whatever I'm talking about, but I'm going to talk about a little bit of spoilers because I don't necessarily know how I'll go over without actually saying to you or conveying to you what I'm talking about. It's just Pluto. Go watch it. Here we go. Let's say how hard it is for me to convey into words how invested or interested I was in episode 1, or I believe it was episode 2. I want to say it was episode 2 where we get into the mansion with North number 2 and Sir Duncan. And the thing is, it's such an interesting sidestep because we're still at the beginning. We're still getting introduced to these characters at the beginning of this story, of this mystery, and then we just sidestep to Sir Duncan as well as North number 2. And from this dynamic, at first it would seemingly be like, oh, it's a bitter old man dynamic, and then as well as this robot that doesn't really know much or can do anything. But we quickly see that that's not the case at all with me going over Sir Duncan, with Sir Duncan him having sort of a hatred for technology and his whole character arc through this episode 1, making it feel like it's a therapeutic lesson or therapeutic therapy session for Sir Duncan, and just seeing his full-on emotions just put out on display and seeing who Sir Duncan is as a person as a whole. Instead of just showing like even if you had a bad hand yourself, it doesn't really give you the excuse to be bitter and harmful and just hurtful to everyone else that isn't yourself, or even self-destructing yourself and just going in a more negative light of things. And sort of just seeing how far hatred will really make you go, or how far down the rabbit hole it will make you go, and how it ruins a person's life to a certain degree. Then there's just the surprising present that is North number 2, right? North number 2 is a lot of things. But the things that I got from North number 2 is just one, the unyielding hope that he sort of had, especially when it came to Sir Duncan in the terms of continuing to help him and sort of help him find that peace of mind, being sort of like the best support system he's ever had in his life. Then there's like the double-sided coin that is his origin of him not wanting to fight anymore. He's a battle unit, but he just wants to play the piano because he's sort of sick of war. He's sick of what he had to do, or is sick of like the memories that keep getting flooded back into his head in a sort of PTSD type of way. And it goes over his character like that, but also as a double-sided coin, it goes over the overarching story itself, going back to this East Indian War that happened like a solid 4 years ago, really just showing the lasting effects of war, hatred, and misunderstanding, and just the lasting effects it has on people for however many years or even just forever. But wanting to quickly move on to Gazette. Gazette is such an interesting person, right? With how many things we find out about him as the story gets along, but so many interesting things that are planted in him, either whether it be regardless of the story that's happening with all the murders, or the memories that he keeps having reoccurring in his mind over and over and over again of him doing something, or things happening or certain events that he just cannot remember or he thinks is a dream, or even the hatred that he learns and gets refound within him, and just the epitome or hope of you getting over that hatred and being the person that you want to be, putting your own life in your own hands. In turn, in my opinion, for Gazette being the robot that overcame hatred. But speaking of robots, continuing on with this conversation, just the question that is being, what makes you human? What makes us human? If you really honestly had to ask me, I would probably say the emotions as well as just the intelligence. And the thing is, it's never said or asked, but in my opinion, it feels like this is a question that sort of inherently gets asked to you every single episode of like what makes us human. Because if you had to ask me with these robots, they're as human as they come. They're more human than a lot of other people on this planet or on this world, and it sort of almost gets acknowledged in the show of how that line gets blurred and blurred every single day as they continue to exist. Then there's also the weird thing with Adolf. I'm not gonna make the low bearing fruit of Adolf, but I will continue with this conversation anyway, right? So with like Adolf, it's weird because like he's one of those people that are like racist towards robots, and you can sort of see where it gets misguided and his hatred just starts to lash out, right? And in turn hurts his family, hurts everyone that he cares basically around him, because he inherently hates robots from the sense of his family being poor because of his dad not being able to have a job because of robots sort of taking over some certain jobs out there, right? And then it gets even more reinforced, more reinstated when his brother dies from a robot, even though he's a bastard, but his brother dies from a robot, leading him to basically join the robot KKK in a way.
Robots only exist to serve us!
Robots only exist to serve us!
Robots are nothing but slaves!
Robots are nothing but slaves!
What? But with being with that same robot that did kill his brother, he inherently learned that this isn't the way, obviously from his family being in danger, from his own life being in danger, to learning and being with that robot that this isn't the way of life that I should be living. This is a horrific thing that I'm partaking in. But the very last thing I wanted to talk about is Adam and him and his turns of overcoming hatred, right? That's like sort of that is the main thing of this whole story, is hatred itself, and how really ugly it could be, how it could come in any sort of shape, form, or size when it comes to either hating someone that is related to you, hating someone that's different, looks different from you, or acts different from you, and how you can necessarily overcome that hatred and come to your own conclusion and solution to be that better person, being more loving, being more kind. Just how Adam learned that. Adam had every single ounce of hatred inside of his body, but just from seeing Gazette's last final moments and seeing how he himself overcame hatred, and seeing how it's actually possible even for a robot to do that, he was able to do that himself, being one of the most human robots, or one of the most human humans of all time. But other than that, thank you guys for watching, thank you guys for liking, comment, subscribing, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.